The most dangerous thing you can do right now is ignore AI. But the second most dangerous thing is use it the way most people are using it. I spent the last 6 months watching people lose their jobs, their businesses, and their competitive edge, not because AI replaced them, but because they fell into one of two camps. The first camp refused to touch it at all, convinced it was a fad or a threat or somehow beneath them. The second camp used it constantly but in the laziest possible way, treating it like a magic box that would do their thinking for them. Both groups are getting crushed right now by a third group that almost nobody talks about, people who figured out how to actually make this technology work for them before it started working against them. And after testing dozens of tools, interviewing people who are quietly building fortunes with this stuff, and honestly making a lot of mistakes myself, I think I finally understand what separates the winners from everyone else. Welcome back to Zero Index. Today we're going to cover something I genuinely believe could be the most important skill shift of the next decade, and I want to be honest with you about something up front. This isn't going to be another video telling you to just use ChatGPT more. That advice is everywhere and it's mostly useless without the context I'm about to give you. So here's where it gets interesting. A friend of mine runs a content agency in Austin, about 15 people, solid revenue, nothing crazy. 6 months ago he started losing clients to a 2-person shop that was somehow producing 3 times the output at half the price. He couldn't figure it out. Same quality, sometimes better. Faster turnarounds. And these 2 people weren't working 80-hour weeks, they were actually working less than his team. What they had figured out was something I'm now calling the leverage gap. They weren't using AI to replace their thinking, they were using it to multiply their judgment. Every decision they would have made once, they were now able to make 50 times, because the grunt work of research and drafting and iteration was handled by systems they'd built. And here's the thing nobody talks about, the gap between people who understand this and people who don't is widening by the day. McKinsey put out a report showing that workers using generative AI effectively are seeing productivity gains of up to 40% in certain tasks. But the key word is effectively. Most people aren't in that category. They're using these tools like a fancy search engine or a slightly better autocomplete. So what does this mean for you? It means the question isn't whether you're using AI. The question is whether you're using it in a way that actually creates leverage, or in a way that just makes you feel productive while your competition pulls ahead. The single biggest mistake I see people make is treating AI like a genie. You ask it a question, it gives you an answer, you're done. That's not how this works. I spent 3 weeks testing different approaches to the same tasks, and what I found surprised me. The people getting the best results aren't asking AI questions at all. They're delegating to it like they would to a junior employee. There's a guy named Dan Shipper who runs a newsletter called Every, and he wrote something that completely changed how I think about this. He said you need to treat AI like an intern with encyclopedic knowledge but zero context about your specific situation. You wouldn't hand an intern a vague task and expect brilliance. You'd give them background, constraints, examples of what good looks like, and then you'd check their work. Same principle here. When I started treating Claude and GPT like capable but context-starved assistants, everything changed. I stopped asking write me a script about AI and started saying here's the audience, here's the tone, here's what I've tried before that didn't work, here's what success looks like, now give me 3 different angles and tell me why each one might resonate. The output quality jumped dramatically. And most people stop here, which is a mistake, because the real power isn't in better prompts. It's in building systems that let you delegate entire workflows, not just individual tasks. So let me show you what I mean by that. There's a company called Zapier that's been around for years, basically connects different apps together. They added AI capabilities last year, and I started using it to automate things I used to spend hours on. Here's one example. Every week I need to review about 30 articles for research, pull out the relevant points, cross-reference them with things I've already covered, and flag contradictions or new angles. Used to take me 4 or 5 hours. Now I have a system where articles go into a folder, an AI reads and summarizes them according to my specific criteria, checks them against a database of my previous content, and delivers a report with recommended topics and potential hooks. Takes about 20 minutes of my time now, mostly just reviewing what it produced. But here's the thing, I didn't build that in a day. I built it piece by piece, automating one step at a time, fixing it when it broke, training it on my preferences. This is the part nobody wants to hear. Making AI work for you is work. It's not typing a question and getting magic. It's building systems, testing them, refining them, and thinking carefully about what parts of your work should even be automated in the first place. And the question nobody's asking is, why isn't everyone doing this already? Partly because it requires upfront investment. Partly because most tutorials make it sound either impossibly technical or embarrassingly simple, neither of which is true. But mostly because people haven't felt the pain yet of competing against someone who has these systems dialed in. Now I want to talk about something that makes me uncomfortable, because I think a lot of AI content glosses over it. There's real risk here, and I don't mean science fiction risk, I mean practical immediate risk that could hurt you this year. I interviewed a marketing director at a mid-sized e-commerce company who got fired in February. Not because she wasn't using AI, but because she was using it without understanding its limitations. She'd been generating product descriptions, social posts, email campaigns, her output numbers looked amazing. But she wasn't catching the subtle errors. Factual mistakes, brand inconsistencies, occasional hallucinations that made it into published content. When one of those errors went viral for the wrong reasons, she took the fall. So what does this mean for you? AI amplifies whatever you put into it, including your mistakes and blind spots. If you don't have a verification layer, if you're not reviewing output with the same care you'd apply to something you wrote yourself, you're building on a foundation that can crack at the worst possible moment. The other risk is dependency. I talked to a writer who got so used to AI assistance that when he tried to write something original, something that required genuine creative struggle, he couldn't do it anymore. He'd atrophied the muscle. And this is where it gets interesting, the solution isn't to avoid AI, it's to be intentional about what you outsource and what you protect. There are certain skills I deliberately don't let AI touch because they're core to what makes my work valuable. For me that's narrative structure and editorial judgment. For you it might be something completely different. But you need to know what that is before you accidentally give it away. So here's the framework I've landed on after all this testing. I think of AI capability in 3 stages. Stage 1 is amplification, using it to do what you already do, just faster. Most people live here. Stage 2 is augmentation, using it to do things you couldn't do before, like analyzing data sets you'd never have time to read or generating variations you'd never have thought of. Fewer people get here. Stage 3 is anticipation, building systems that predict what you need before you know you need it, that surface opportunities and threats proactively. Almost nobody is here yet, but the people who are, they're the ones reshaping industries. Right now I'm somewhere between stage 2 and stage 3 on different parts of my workflow. And the most important thing I've learned is that moving through these stages isn't about finding better tools. It's about asking better questions. What am I spending time on that doesn't require my specific judgment? What decisions am I making that could benefit from more information than I can humanly process? What patterns exist in my work that I'm not seeing? When you start asking those questions, the tools reveal themselves. The systems become obvious. And the gap between where you are and where you could be starts to close. The people who figure this out in the next 12 to 18 months are going to have an advantage that will be genuinely hard to catch. Not impossible, but hard. And the window where this knowledge is still relatively rare, where you can still get ahead of the curve instead of just keeping up with it, that window is closing faster than most people realize. If you want to keep seeing content like this, content that actually goes deep instead of just skimming the surface, subscribe to Zero Index. I'll see you in the next one.